Become a Saint with Nico, Episode 7. We're reading from the life of Saint Philip Neri. Chapter 4. Philip studies philosophy and theology. When the youthful Philip had led his austere life for about 2 years, he determined, in order the better to understand heavenly things, to taste them more perfectly, to add the study of philosophy and theology to what he had previously learned. First, therefore, he betook himself to philosophy, in which he profited so much, according to the testimony of Alessandro Buzio, his fellow student, and afterwards an eminent philosopher. He was reckoned one of the most distinguished scholars at the time in the schools of Rome. His masters in philosophy were Cesare Giacomelli, who was afterwards Bishop of Bencastro in Calabria, and Alfonso Ferro, both of them among the first lecturers of Rome in their day. He studied theology in the schools of the Augustinian monks under Alessio Stradella, afterwards Bishop of Nepi, and laid a sufficient foundation therein to last throughout his life, so that in his old age he used to answer the deepest questions about the Holy Trinity, the angels, the Incarnation, and other matters, both theological and philosophical, with a memory as fresh as if he had but just studied them. Many were greatly astonished to hear him speak with such solidity and depth about the various opinions of those subjects, and the Abbot Maffa said of him that he was magnus estimator ingeniorum. When he conversed with such of his spiritual children as were students, both for their advancement and as a means of endeavoring himself to them, and so winning them to the service of God, he would enter into discussion with them with as much ease as if he had made those questions his daily study. Hence many young men delighted to frequent his rooms, where they found both a help and a stimulus in their studies. At other times, though not often, he would discourse as occasion rose with the first theologians of the age, and in particular with Father Ambrogio of Bagnuolo, who was afterwards made Bishop of Nardo by St. Pius V, Father Paolo Bernardini of Lucca, a man of the greatest learning and prudence, and others with whom he was on terms of familiarity. But with those who he didn't have the same intimacy, it was his way to so conceal himself that no one would have taken him for a man of education, especially as in familiar conversation his manner was concise and interrupted, and he did not use many words to develop his thoughts. Yet when he chose, he could discourse with a length and sequency most striking to his hearers. Thus a prelate of great worth, having one day had a long conversation with him, said when he went away, "I thought that father was a simple and illiterate man, but I have found him great in both spirituality and in learning." The same happened to the blessed Alessandro Sauli, Bishop of Pavia, a very holy and deeply read man. In conversation with Philip, he entered upon some theological questions and was astonished at the learned answers which the saint made, having up until then esteemed him certainly as a saint, but not much of a scholar. He was so ready and well-grounded in scholastic and doctrinal matters that when the discourses first began in San Girolamo della Carità and in San Giovanni della Florentini, where there were so few preachers that laymen, if spiritual and eloquent, were admitted to discourse, if by chance Philip heard any proposition stated or any fact narrated without fitting clearness and precision, he would immediately mount the pulpit himself and expound it so judiciously as to show his own learning in the matter, even in spite of himself, so that many held his knowledge to be rather infused than acquired. One takeaway to learn from St. Philip so that we can become saints is to prioritize being clear in our words. I think one valuable lesson is to just put ourselves in the other person's shoes and see if they would really get what we're saying. And if we know the person, we know, their strengths and maybe their hobbies, things that they do, maybe we can relate to them through their experiences, their life experiences, so that they can understand. If we're talking about God, they can understand God more deeply and it'll stay with them longer. So again, if we're going to be like St. Philip, let's try to be clear. Let's try to be joyful in what we're saying and say it so that we're trying to get to the other person. We're trying to bring them closer to God, shine God's face on them, and not try to make ourselves look smart, not try to necessarily use big words. Maybe some will slip out every now and then, but try to be clear. Try to prioritize the other person's learning, making the other person feel comfortable and understood, instead of trying to sound like the smartest person in the world. Again, St. Philip, the patron saint of joy, is going to bring joy in his words, is going to bring love in his words, and put himself second.